It's Monday, the 18th of October. The Prime Minister to lead tributes to the murdered MP Sir David Amess in the Commons as new detail emerges about the suspect.
I'm live in Leigh-on-Sea as Sir David's family remember a strong and courageous man.
Green team as the Duke of Cambridge reveals the first winners of his environmental prize. His father sends a warning about the planet.
If we didn't stop polluting our planet, we would face a very dangerous future indeed.
At least 27 people have been killed. Dozens are missing after heavy rain causes floods in southern India. Virtually painless. Could this be a new way of getting injections without a needle? We'll speak to the brains behind it. And after a medical emergency halts play at Newcastle, a call for defibrillators in all football grounds. Speaking to the man behind that at 9:20. Good morning to you. As you can see, Deputy Prime Minister is with us this morning. I want to talk about tributes being paid to the Conservative MP Sir David Amess in the House of Commons later on. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
How do you remember him?
Well, the last event I did with him was at conference, and he was the most tenacious animal welfare campaigner. He'd been passing private members' bills since the 80s on looking after animals. He was still doing it very much at the vanguard of it. He was a kind, decent man, very much known as sort of Mr. Essex, Mr. Southend, but he defied caricature. He was big-hearted. He came down just last month to the 10-year anniversary of my Conservative Women's Organisation event. He was incredibly energetic. But what really defined him is that even when he disagreed with people, there was a generosity of spirit, and we'll miss him and I'll miss him personally. He was very, very kind, generous with his time and advice ever since I've been in the House of Commons.
It's not a one-off, though, is it? 2 MPs in 5 years. What needs to change?
Well, I think the first thing to say is I was contacted by my local police over the weekend. All MPs will be getting those calls just to check in. We appreciate that. I certainly found it reassuring. I think everyone's in a slightly different position. Everyone's got different circumstances, so I don't want to sort of speak for others. My own personal feeling is we need to do our due diligence. We need to think about how available we are and make sure we're not at undue risk. But no one wants, and I certainly don't want a wedge put between me and the people that elect me and the people that I'm voted in to serve, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So
plainclothes officers at surgeries?
Well, I guess it depends on the individual. I think we're more likely to look at things like private security guards. There's already, I believe, money available for that. But again, the problem you've got is a lot of people coming to see their MP, it's quite a thing to do. It takes quite a bit of courage. They'll feel sensitive about it. They'll feel vulnerable itself. You do not want to add to that sense of foreboding as they're waiting, for example, for a constituency surgery. On the other hand, we are, and this is the nature of the modern age, very much out there. We're available. We advertise everything we're doing in a much, online and all the rest of it. So I think we need to just think about a proportionate risk-based approach, and that will vary from person to person. I think the other thing, of course, the elephant in the room in all this is the amount of online hate that we all get. It's out of control. I know the Home Secretary has talked about what more she wants to do. The online harms bill is going through pre-legislative scrutiny. I'm a free speech man. I want to defend that to my dying days. But at the same time, I think the amount of vile abuse and the vilification directed at MPs, and in particular female MPs, I think it's got to stop.
Let me take you back, if I may, Deputy Prime Minister, to whether there should be plainclothes officers, though.
Yeah.
Do you think there should be or not?
I probably wouldn't choose to have them outside a surgery that I had. I think I would worry about the chilling effect. I'm not sure it's necessary to have that.
But those members, potentially, I suppose, women members of Parliament who wanted them, you wouldn't stand in the way of that?
Oh, God, no.
Should they be armed?
Look, I think I can't sit here and legislate or prescribe for every MP. I think anyone that has a real nervousness or concern, we need to, and the forces are already doing this, the local force needs to sit down with them and see what they can do to provide the concrete security, I mean the objective security, but also what will give them reassurance and peace of mind. We're not going to be much good for our constituents if we're not confident going into those meetings and if we're all looking over our shoulder with trepidation.
I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you have seen the front page of the Times newspaper this morning, the Qatar trip last week. It was a meeting with the Taliban, amongst others. And of course, Sir David was part of that trip. Some of those on the trip feel anxious about it as a result. Should they be offered more security?
Well, I'm going to be very careful what I say about the case of Sir David, because the police need the time and space to conduct their investigation, and I don't want to say anything that could remotely be perceived as prejudicing any further prosecution. But look, if anyone is nervous, whether it's in relation to foreign trips or the advocacy they do here in the UK, they should talk to their local police forces and see what more can be done.
There's a lot of talk over the weekend and also in the newspapers this morning about post-pandemic radicalism. What does that mean to you?
Well, these terms people come up with them, but I think what we saw over the period of the pandemic is a huge amount of additional activity online, and people using online, whether it's for the work-life balance, whether it's for educating their kids in a way that was, for the large part, was a great relief and a great solace given what we're all going through with the pandemic. People could talk to their grandparents, their young children in ways, or relatives in ways that we hadn't done before. But there is also a dark side to what happens online, and I suspect a lot of people, or as well as experiencing the positives, there will have been just moments where people were anxious. We know that those with mental health struggled during the pandemic, and although crime as a result came down overall because there are less people on the streets and all the rest of it, we know that there was at least some extra nefarious activity online. So I wouldn't want to dub the whole of what happens online in a negative way. It's hugely emancipating in many ways. But I think in the pandemic it really magnified the positive, but also some of the vulnerabilities, and that's what we're all working through.
Yeah, but I mean, there are saddos who are being radicalised by even bigger saddos during the pandemic, and it seems there's not much we can do about it.
Well, look, there is certainly, I think, an element of more people who are at risk, vulnerable, or at risk of radicalisation would have been spending more time online. I'm absolutely confident that the intelligence agencies and the police are monitoring that with maximum energy and vigour. I know from my time working on the National Security Council as Foreign Secretary and now how hard they work. But of course they've got to adapt to a different set of circumstances. But they're on the case. They do an incredible job. I don't think anyone does a better job. But what you're really seeing is behaviour morphing and changing. And obviously we've got to adapt and respond to that.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm really asking is whether the PREVENT programme is still fit for purpose. Well,
PREVENT's much broader than just the online piece. Look, it's being reviewed at the moment by the Home Secretary and others in government. And has been for the best part of 3 years. And that's right. Look, what I say more generally about it, it does have the ability to triage up to what are known as channel panels, which has an interagency input, so all the different arms of government and local government, when there is a risk-based assessment and to take proportionate action in relation to it. But there is never going to be a 100% safety net against those that wish to harm us. What we've got is a series of mitigations and checks to do everything we can to keep us safe. But there is no risk-free society in a free society. That the head of MI5 has consistently over many years been clear about that.
Let's talk more about PREVENT. Is it fit for purpose? Well,
look, I don't think there's ever a perfect counter-extremism strategy, so we're always looking at what we can do to improve it. As I say, it's under review. The Home Secretary's been talking about that.
Do you know when that might come to fruition?
Well, I'm not sure exactly the time frame for it, but I know the Home Secretary wants to... I mean, on the one hand, we want to get on with it and learn the lessons from it. On the other hand, I think, particularly given what we're going through now and the questions that are being asked, I think it's quite right that it takes into account any lessons that we derive from the current set of circumstances.
But you would think 3 years is, I mean, it's well overdue.
Well, I think there will be a case for setting it out more formally. But of course, the reviews that we conduct, it's not like we're waiting till the end of it to learn the lessons. It is an iterative process. So there's a whole range of learning that right the way through gets fed in to what obviously the intelligence agencies, but also down at the local authority level and all the other different arms of government and indeed the bodies at local level, including people talk about schools, what they pick up from local NHS services. So we do learn the lessons as we go, but in terms of coming up with a formal set of propositions or learning from it, the Home Secretary will decide the right moment for that. And obviously we want to take into account everything that we've learnt from the pandemic, but also, of course, in relation to Sir David.
No better moment than the second MP being murdered in 5 years.
Well, that will obviously, I'm sure, crystallise the thinking around what needs to be done, what more needs to be done. But we come back, I mean, we've looked at Prevent for many years. We've done lesson learning reviews in the past, and what I would say is it's a process. We're always looking to make sure as the threat evolves, we evolve with it. As the nature of the risks we face change, we adapt to it. So in a way, it's a process. There's not going to be one silver bullet that comes out and says, OK, we're all going to be perfectly safe. We learn the lessons, we build up, shore up the defences and the mitigations that we can possibly put in place. And we want to do it in a proportionate way. So I think that's the right approach.
I just wanted to go back briefly, if I may, on one of the comments that you made about the pandemic and the lockdown and it magnifying the vulnerables. Does that mean that potentially people like you and your colleagues are more at risk now than they were before the pandemic?
I don't know whether I would say we're more or less at risk. To be honest with you, since 2010, when I first became an MP, I've been very conscious that the risk to us as representatives has increased. I think particularly at the local level, I think
From whom?
Well, there's a whole range of things. I think there's, I mean, you characterised it a certain way. I think there's clearly a lot of people with mental health issues, and the way MPs are out there in the public domain, particularly the amount of abuse we get, they can become a lightning rod for that. Who knows whether that has an effect? But I think we're all just conscious that as we try and make sure we've got that connection of trust with our constituents and our communities, which most MPs across the divide will all rally round and want to cherish and nurture. We're all trying to do the best thing we can for our constituents. We may have very different views about it, but I think most of us would agree on that. We just don't want that wedge being put in our way. There's been a lot of ebbing trust in politicians since the expenses scandal. There's other things that come along and dent confidence. There's also the vilification, the abuse we all get, and we work very hard to try and connect with our constituents and our communities. And so as we do that, of course, there's a risk that comes with it.
Yeah,
so we've got to manage that sensibly.
OK, so how do you manage that sensibly? You say you're more vulnerable now in the last decade than you were when you first came into Parliament, and that can only, presumably, given the amount of online hate that we witness day in, day out, that's only going to get worse.
Well, I think there's no sign that the abuse is abating, but we're going to look at that very carefully. I think it's incumbent on all of us, MPs, the language we use, the media, the language they use, and obviously the social media companies. This is not me passing the buck. I'm just saying we've got a collective responsibility. We've got to look at the practical measures, how we advertise ourselves. It's difficult because most constituents don't think about politics very much every week. Most swing voters, most of the people who are hardest to reach, most of the vulnerable, we need to really go and advertise ourselves. But by doing that, we also advertise ourselves to everyone else. I think there's a proportionate approach to this. We look at the risk, we talk to our local police forces, we perhaps think about what we do and how, without allowing a wedge to be put in there between us and our constituents. But also and then this is the number one thing, we do not allow something like this, and David Amess would be the first to say it, to undermine, to corrode or erode our democracy. It's absolutely critical. So we'll take the targeted measures, but we don't let the terrorists win by creating wedges or walls between us and those who go to sin.
It doesn't help when politicians call each other things like scum, though, does it?
I think it does, and I know what you're referring to. I think all of us, it's incumbent on all of us to think very carefully about the way we approach politics. I always think that you play the issue, not the person. It used to be said the man, not the ball, not the man. It's probably a bit sexist for the current political debate, but there is something in the fact. And the thing that above all over the weekend I've been thinking about is there's no one that epitomised that more than Sir David Amess. He could break bread with people from across the aisles. He had very strong views. He was Catholic, a Brexiteer, but he never allowed himself to lose sight in debate of treating someone else with respect. And I think part of that was the empathy he had for other people.
But you acknowledge that politicians should be perhaps a little bit more careful about the words they choose to describe each other.
We've been saying it for years. But what I don't want to do in the light of Sir David's death is for this to become partisan. It's incumbent on all of us. It's incumbent on the media. And again, I'm not trying to close down the space for scrutiny of your elected representatives. That's what you're here for. But I think we all need to just think about, are we playing the issue or are we trying to degrade the individual? Because there's been too much of the latter. And
you talked about social media as well. The Home Secretary talked about trying to have anonymous accounts closed down. You second that?
Well, I think we'll look at that. What you don't want to do is either send a message to tyrants all over the world that they can expose those who are campaigning bravely and need that anonymity. Equally, we know that some of those campaigning are vulnerable and will not want to be in the public domain. But I have to say that on balance, I think that there is a case really for looking very carefully at this. I don't see why people should be able to abuse the position on social media from a veil of anonymity, particularly given the consequences that we're seeing. And frankly, even short of a murder, I just think, and I look at it from my female colleagues' point of view, I know female colleagues of mine, I'm sure it's true across the parties, who have come off Twitter because it's just so vile. I think that can't be right, and I don't think that that is about free speech. I think it is narrowing the debate for responsible public discourse. We just need to be careful about those boundaries.
OK. I wondered if I could ask you particularly about what happened with Sir David on Friday. And we believe that the priest was stopped from giving him the last rites. That can't be right.
I don't know any of the details around that. Again, I'm being really careful, Kay, not to speculate.
Catholic.
I know. I don't know anything about it. I'm probably just better off not responding to that, although all I can say is I know how the paramedics on the scene worked so hard to try and keep him alive. So, again, without knowing the full facts, forgive me if I don't jump in and but
you would acknowledge how important the last rites are to a devout Catholic?
Of course I would.
Let me ask you about your comments about legislating to correct court judgments in human rights cases that go against the government.
What's the question? Very happy to do that. Yeah.
So tell me about it. Why do you feel that way? Isn't it up to judges and lawyers as opposed to ministers?
Well, look, there's a whole range of areas where we get judgments that the Parliament doesn't agree with. The separation of powers is very clear. I don't think this is a criticism of the judiciary. The judiciary would say the same to me. If Parliament doesn't like it, vote to correct it. And we're looking very carefully at whether we can formalise a mechanism or whether we just do it bit by bit. If it wasn't for the tragic circumstances, I would be presenting a judicial review and courts bill to the House of Commons today. We'll be doing it later this month. One of the things that we'll look at is the number of appeals in immigration tribunal cases, and whether after you've conducted those appeals, you can then, even if they've been unsuccessful, go and judicial review in the High Court. 750 of those cases a year, just 3% of those are successful. It seems to me that that's a good example of litigation by attrition, which is not serving the public interest.
Just before I let you go, in your old job, you were very much involved with what was happening with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. She's lost her latest appeal against a second jail sentence in Iran. It would be remiss of me not to ask you.
My heart goes out to Nazanin. I spoke to her recently. Look, we're absolutely clear, and I know Liz Truss and the Foreign Office team will continue working as tenaciously as ever to secure her release. She's still on furlough, my understanding, so she's not in custody. And we call on Iran to release all of our arbitrarily detained nationals. And my heart is with the family. OK, we must let you go. Thank you for taking the time. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if you want to catch up on any of that interview, you can watch it, of course, on the Sky News app, or you can head to my Twitter feed to get some clips from the interview as well. Twitter, @Sky News or @Kay Burley. Aisha joining us now. Hello to you, Aisha. The latest from the scene there from the Deputy Prime Minister, reluctant to comment on reports that Sir David was not afforded the last rites ahead of his death on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, well, the community here is very much grieving. It's a community in mourning, remembering Sir David. Over the weekend and early this morning as well, we've seen people come down here to lay flowers, remembering Sir David, many messages of support and love for his friends and family, and also people reflecting on just how much of an impact and real difference he made on their lives. And of course, over the weekend, we also saw vigils take place, memorial services, people coming together to really pay tribute to Sir David. His family released a statement thanking the public for the overwhelming support they received. And in that statement, they described Sir David as being a strong and courageous man. They said, "We are absolutely broken, but we will survive and carry on for the sake of a wonderful and inspiring man."
OK, thank you. Looking at some of this morning's newspapers for you, front pages certainly. The eye quotes from the statement released by Sir David Amess's family, in which they said, "Our hearts are shattered." The Daily Mail asks why the suspect wasn't flagged sooner, given he was sent on an anti-terror mentoring programme. But that, of course, was when he was much younger, the police would say. The Yorkshire Post speaks to Kim Ledbetter, the sister of the murdered MP Jo Cox. She now represents the same constituency and says MPs are human beings too. The Sun, twisted by hate preacher. The Sun takes a look at the murder suspect and how he was potentially radicalised by YouTube videos. In other news, The Guardian hears that a number of sponsors of the COP26 climate summit are unhappy with how it is being managed. And China's testing of a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile has alarmed US intelligence sources. That's according to the Financial Times. Ahead of COP26 in Glasgow, 6 young climate activists from 6 different continents have delivered a powerful message about how climate change is already having an impact on their lives and deliver an emotive call to action. COP26 in Your Hands is a new Sky Kids documentary introduced by Prince Charles and featuring the Prime Minister. Becky Johnson reports.
In 2019, experiencing the fires was pretty scary.
Could there be a more shocking sight than this? A mosque, now submerged under the rising waters.
In the last 20 years, we've lost an area of the Amazon that is bigger than the whole of the United Kingdom.
The reality of climate change and its impact on lives around the world. Young people on 6 continents sharing their experiences.
Over the last few decades, Cumbria has suffered a series of devastating floods.
Their cause close to the heart of Prince Charles. This, his message to them.
I'm old enough to have a grandson. Like you, he's learning how climate change is causing the big storms and floods, the droughts, fires, and food shortages we're seeing around the world. When I was his age, people had no idea about the damage they were doing. But by the time I was a teenager, I started to see that if we didn't stop polluting our planet, we would face a very dangerous future indeed. This is why I've spent so much of my life trying to warn that we have to operate in ways which make nature thrive, not suffer.
As world leaders prepare to meet for COP26, these young people want action.
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Thank you all so much for sharing what you have to say. Your determination to tackle climate change and your high hopes for COP26 couldn't be clearer. If we don't slam on the brakes right now, we're going to go right past the point where we're able...
My news.
Well, new Sky documentary COP26 in Your Hands follows 6 young people from across the world who are already feeling the impacts of climate change. It's available now on Sky Kids, or you can watch it here on Sky News at 12:30. At least 27 people have been reported killed after the southern Indian state of Kerala was hit by flooding. Neville Lazarus is in Delhi for us. Hi, Neville. What happened?
Well, these are retreating monsoons. They are not unusual to have rain at this period of time, but it's just the volume and intensity of the rain in a very short period of time that has created havoc in that state. There's been floods, there's been landslides. A lot of people have died because of landslides, and this is, as climate activists had pointed out many times over, because of rapid urbanization and unregulated development. The government report had mentioned that many years ago, but nothing was done about it because it was inconvenient for the government and development in the state of Kerala. We've seen flooding in many districts. The Indian Navy, Army and the Air Force and the disaster response teams have been all over the state trying to rescue people. But the problems are not yet over. The meteorological department has warned of more rain to come in the next few days. Fishermen have been banned from going out into the sea, and the problem is going to increase, according to some of the activists. There have been about 156 relief centres and camps being set up and thousands of people evacuated. The problems are still continuing out here.
OK, thank you. Looking at the impact of climate change on the planet, top line, have a look at our dashboard. Here we go. So the top line, as you know, is by now it's the real-time power mix, 42% fossil fuels being used right now. Global warming since 1880 up 1.23 degrees. The next line is how long scientists think we probably have left before we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius unless something is done about it, the point of no return, say many. And the scary figure at the bottom, the millions of tonnes in CO2 emissions. Now, it's claimed there's no sign of an end to the volcanic eruption on the Spanish island of La Palma. 4 weeks after it began, more than 1,800 buildings and homes have been destroyed, and around 7,000 people have been displaced since the volcano first erupted last month. The government's pledged millions of euros to help rebuild damaged infrastructure to the island that lives mainly for tourism. These are live pictures from La Palma as we speak, and as you can see, no signs of abating anytime soon. Other stories making news for you so far this morning here on The Breakfast Show. Scotland's COVID passport scheme begins today amid practical issues and protests from opposition parties. Proof of full vaccination is required to enter nightclubs and large events in a bid to limit the spread of the virus and increased vaccine uptake, particularly among young people. 17 people, including 16 US citizens, have reportedly been kidnapped in Haiti. It's thought the missionaries were on their way home from building an orphanage when they were abducted on Saturday in the capital of Port-au-Prince. The US State Department says it's in regular contact with senior Haitian authorities to ensure the safety of its citizens. 4 men have been arrested following the death of a man at a lorry park in Felixstowe on Sunday. Paramedics were called to reports that a man was in need of urgent medical attention at around 10 to 2 in the morning, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Police believe the man had been involved in an argument before his death. Now check out these pictures. A rare waterspout has been seen spinning off the coast of Cuba. The city's provincial meteorological centre said it took place around 5 p.m. local time yesterday. Waterspouts are tornadoes that occur over a body of water but never reach the land. They are characterised by a funnel-shaped cloud, something like that. Still to come on the programme for you, fully vaccinated travellers will no longer need to quarantine from November the 1st upon arrival in Australia. Speak to a local surf school owner on Bondi Beach next.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Southeast Asia correspondent in Bangkok.
Our job is to tell the truth. This is a forgotten front line. They are dying here. Here it comes. Cut.
Boy, have we got some interesting ways of showing you what's going on.
Their message to us, get ready.
Something like apocalypse.
Instructing you to stay at home.
I can't believe we did that.
It's pretty special, isn't it?
Tributes will be paid to the Conservative MP Sir David Amess in the House of Commons. Later, politicians are expected to share their memories of the father of 5 who was killed while meeting constituents in Leigh-on-Sea on Friday. Earlier, I asked the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab whether he thinks there should be plainclothes police officers outside constituency surgeries.
I probably wouldn't choose to have them outside a surgery that I had. I think I would worry about the chilling effect. I'm not sure it's necessary to have that.
But those members, potentially, I suppose, women members of Parliament who wanted them, you wouldn't stand in the way of them?
Oh, God, no.
Should they be armed?
Look, I think I can't sit here and legislate or prescribe for every MP. I think anyone that has a real nervousness or concern, we need to, and the forces are already doing this, the local force needs to sit down with them and see what they can do to provide the concrete security, I mean the objective security, but also what will give them reassurance and peace of mind. We're not going to be much good for our constituents if we're not confident going into those meetings and if we're all looking over our shoulder with trepidation.
Tamara is here. Hi, Tamara. Good morning. Thoughts?
Well, you get a sense, Kay, from Dominic Raab of why this is such a difficult issue, MPs' security. He said that his police force had contacted him over the weekend. Indeed, the Home Secretary said that all police forces should have contacted their MPs over the weekend to review security in the light of this tragic incident, which has really shocked Westminster. When I've talked to MPs over the weekend, whatever their political party and wherever they are in the country, they feel like it could have been me, it could have been anyone, and they're very concerned about it. But when you go into what measures should be taken, should MPs stop meeting constituents in person and do it online? A lot of MPs would feel deeply uncomfortable about that. Should there be plainclothes police on the door? Dominic Raab there said he wouldn't want that. He thinks it would be chilling. He understands why other MPs would want to, but should this be for the police to decide rather than individual MPs? These are the sort of difficult distinctions that need to be made. We know that the Speaker of the House of Commons and the Home Secretary want things to change immediately right now in time for the surgeries that are happening in constituencies next Friday. They want this to be action and not talking, but a lot of MPs have very different views on how they want that to look.
And as far as the PREVENT programme is concerned, is it fit for purpose? It's been reviewed for the best part of the last 3 years. What did he say about that?
Well, that is a very important part of this because the reports we've had are that this suspect was at some point referred to the PREVENT programme, but in the year to March.
When he was at school.
When he was at school, he's now 25. In the year to March, there were 6,000 referrals to the Prevent programme. As Dominic Raab was saying, quoting the head of MI5, you can't follow every single one of them. No counter-terrorism system is infallible. But were there concerns that should have been escalated up the chain? He said that there is the potential to do that. If someone is on the Channel counter-extremist programme, there is the potential for them to be triaged up, he said, if there are concerns about them. Now, we have no idea if that happened in this situation, but he certainly seemed to be kicking it back to the Home Office by saying this Prevent review, which has been delayed by COVID and delayed by various other things, he says they are learning lessons all the time, but it's important that all of the events of this weekend and what can be learnt from them, what seems to many people to be an entirely random attack, or we don't know at the moment what else may have fed into it, that all needs to be learned when it comes to this Prevent review, which we still don't have a date for when it will come back.
No, and just finally, when it came to a story in this morning's newspaper suggesting that potentially what happened to Sir David could have had a link with his recent visit to Qatar, he had a view on that as well.
Yeah, so Sir David Amess was the chair of the all-party group. There are lots of MPs who, in groups, were interested in certain countries, and he'd been on a trip there. And we have no idea at this stage whether that was feeding into the attack, but when you put it to him that other people on that trip may be now concerned about their security, and that may be something that should be raised, he seemed to agree that that's something that should be considered.
OK, for now. Tomorrow, thank you. In other news, you'll know, of course, half-term, lots of people are hoping to be able to travel, given that the red list has got smaller and smaller and smaller. I think only 7 countries remain on the red list, most of those in South America. One of the countries that has come off is Australia, and fully vaccinated travellers able to enter New South Wales from the 1st of November without the need to self-quarantine. It's another major governmental easing of COVID restrictions following Sydney's recent lockdown lift, which will open the door to tourism and business for the holiday industry. Joined now by the owner of Surf School, Let's Go Surfing, Brenda Miley. Hi, Brenda.
Hi.
Oh my, that looks absolutely amazing. Tell me what life is like on Bondi Beach today.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's a fantastic day and everyone's out having a great time in the surf. So it's starting to get back to normal and we're feeling very free.
OK, what was it like during lockdown?
Look, lockdown was tricky. I actually still haven't had my hair cut, so that's a bit of a concern. But we were all stuck within 5 kilometres, but I was lucky that I live on Bondi and we could exercise for 1 hour a day so I could go surfing.
How's it impacted on other businesses around the beach, and what difference do you think it will make now?
Oh, look, everybody is in a world of pain during lockdown. You know, it's hard to know what to do, how to do it. You know, we've lost staff because they've moved on to other activities or other jobs. So now lockdown's lifted, we're all feeling really positive and really excited and looking forward to having people come visit us again.
So what's the appeal of Bondi Beach? Tell us.
Well, you just have to look out there. It's beautiful. Bondi Beach is 8 kilometres from Australia's largest city, Sydney. But when you get down on the beach, you could be anywhere in the world. So it's a beautiful beach, beautiful surf, fun activities, great cafes, great places to have a beer. So we'd love to welcome you all back here.
And is there any concern that this might just be, well, it's tentative steps, baby steps, and you could find yourselves in a similar position as we have in the UK a couple of times where we've had to lock down again?
Absolutely. Look, during COVID, anything could happen. We're just lucky that we've started to move out of the big lockdowns. But, you know, anything could happen and we could still get locked down again. I feel like the government, though, has sort of started moving us along a bit better. So, you know, we're all positive and hoping that it's going to be okay.
I'm sure. Brendan, just before I let you go, what's a normal day for you on Bondi Beach, just so you can rub it in even more?
Well, I get up really early, like at 6 a.m, and I come for a jog on the beach or a surf, depending on what the surf's like. Then I go and do some work, a bit of admin in my surf school. I might teach some surfing lessons. Then I go for another surf on the beach. And I have a nice coffee and have a nice lunch at the RSL club. So I sort of do what I take people who come visiting with me do.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that sounds horrible. You'd much prefer my day, getting up at 3:17 in the dark and having a cup of tea and then getting to the office and reading the papers. Trust me. Let's swap for a week and see how we get on.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to come over. Definitely.
Hey, fantastic. It's a deal. It's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing that amazing view with us this morning. We appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. See you soon.
OK, see you bet. See you soon. Surf's up. Now, the elusive yet beautiful Northern Lights have been filmed lighting up the Canadian night sky. Look at these pictures. Here we go. Witnessed above the town of St. Paul in Alberta. The time-lapse of the Aurora Borealis was possible thanks to a solar storm. According to NASA, the lights were formed from clouds of solar plasma combining with embedded magnetic fields, which were released into space following a solar eruption. Have you ever seen the Northern Lights? Have you got some pictures? Maybe send them to us. We can share them with our viewers. So that is in Alberta in Canada. How spectacular is that? Wow, the Northern Lights. Now, it's World Menopause Day, and for the founder of Menopause Support, it's all about education and support. She'll be joining us next.
I think sadly, along with, other Black music artists, I've actually received a bit of a pre-warning of the damage that racism in the music industry can do to your mental health. So a lot of my Black female music artist friends have shared with me their stories of being told that they can't do certain genres, that they have to change their hair, they have to change the way that they talk, in order to kind of get ahead in this industry. So I've kind of positioned myself, knowing of the damage it can do to your mental health, I've positioned myself a little bit on the outskirts of the music industry. And even still, I've had experiences where companies and labels have made it clear that there's only room for one Black artist on their roster or one artist that does Black music.
The industry needs to work together. We need to collaborate, all of us. That's what real diversity means. We need to look at transparency in terms of earnings. We've already seen that in the industry that Black music creators and industry professionals earn less. Black women specifically earn considerably less. We need to have that transparency and understand what's going on. We need to give support at grassroots level. And we also need to give support in terms of well-being.
People like Leanne Pinnock, obviously from Little Mix, have spoken out, and Keisha from the Sugar Babes, and also Alexandra Burke. So I do think there's an attention on this issue right now, which is great. I just do think, as Roger said, that there needs to be more collaboration, more transparency. I think our culture of not really talking about music kind of does us a disservice. I love to talk about, talk about money and what people are being paid in the music industry, because I think that helps to avoid pay disparity as well. And hopefully having a body in any other industry, you'd have kind of a HR body that you could go to. And I think Black Lives in Music is perfectly set up for this role, to be able to hold leaders to account and to get everyone together to collaborate to make the music industry more fair.
We're seeing artists who start at the top and work their way very quickly down to the bottom without the support of the industry. So we must work together, we must collaborate and give support so that there's a level playing field for everyone, regardless of their colour.
Did you know that reducing pollution outside of school can help stop toxic air getting trapped in our classrooms?
Most places will have a grey and misty start to Sunday, with outbreaks of rain, mainly in the north. Brighter skies will develop in parts of the south through the afternoon, and it will feel quite warm. The rain in the north should ease later on in the day. Taking a look at the daily air quality index, where levels of air pollution are bandied from 1 being low to 10 being very high, brisk winds and outbreaks of rain for some will maintain low levels of air pollution on Sunday.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Today marks World Menopause Day. A national campaign, #MakeMenopauseMatter, is also dedicated to educating people about the menopause and was successful in getting it added to the English curriculum last year. Joining us now is the founder of the campaign and Menopause Support, Diane Danzebrink. Hello to you, Diane. Thanks for joining us. Tell us about your experience of the menopause.
Morning, Kay. My experience of the menopause was pretty debilitating. I had a surgical menopause, which is where for me, it was ovaries, womb and cervix were removed. But having my ovaries removed put me into what's called a surgical menopause at 45. And unfortunately, nobody sat me down prior to the surgery or in fact after it and described just how debilitating a surgical menopause could be. That took me to a very dark place in my life, where I came very close to ending my life. I was incredibly fortunate to have amazing family around me who got me the help that I needed at crisis point. However, once I started to feel a little bit like myself again, I started to wonder if I'd just been incredibly unlucky or if there were other people who were struggling the way that I had. And searching made me realise that I had opened a Pandora's box, and made me realise that actually I had to do something to change it for the future.
What's your advice to women who are going through the menopause? Because, of course, it affects different women in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1 in 4 will have almost no symptoms at all. 3 out of 4 will have symptoms, and 1 in 4 will describe their symptoms as debilitating. So my advice would be, before menopause comes along, educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about it. Understand what the potential symptoms could potentially be, and also what the management of those symptoms could be, so that you understand how you can help yourself. Of course, that's all very well, but for most of us, we have to get that help via perhaps our GP. And currently in the UK, not all GPs have factual, up-to-date, evidence-based information about menopause and treatments. So very often menopause symptoms, particularly the psychological and cognitive symptoms, are misdiagnosed as anxiety and depression, and women are offered antidepressants. So it's really important that we educate GPs, we educate the public. So that's the reason that I started the campaign back in 2018, is to have mandatory training for all GPs, to have guidance and support in every workplace, and as you mentioned, education in schools. And it's absolutely vital. It's a win-win situation, both for women, those who know and love women, and also for those who deliver health education. And it would save an absolute fortune for the NHS too.
And for Diane, and for those who employ women as well, of course. It's good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us on the programme. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, questions have been raised over how to protect MPs after the killing of Sir David Amess, with suggestions plainclothes officers or private security could be brought in to ensure their security. Stephen Roberts is joining us, former Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Met. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us. What more can police do to protect MPs?
There's a whole scale of precautions that could be taken, but I think the first point is each MP's protection needs to be tailored to that MP, to the sort of activities that they're undertaking, when they're doing it, where they're doing it, and indeed what that particular MP is prepared to accept. I heard Dominic Raab on your programme a few moments ago saying that he would be very unhappy with having police officers outside a surgery that he was running. So there's going to be a period of negotiation. And proportionate protection for each particular MP's circumstances.
But what about those MPs that do want support, and also potentially those that think they don't need it, like I'm sure Sir David didn't feel that he needed it, and yet he's now left, he's left his widow and 5 daughters.
Well, it's got to be, at the end of the day, the MP themselves who agrees to the protection. Frankly, even on a practical scale, it's all but impossible to protect somebody who doesn't want to be protected. But I'm sure that a negotiation process could get us through that. And then it's a matter of, there's a scale of precautions. We can start with basically an appointment system to see MPs. Then those appointments, those people who've made appointments having to have their identities verified, perhaps checks being done against intelligence indices on those individuals. And then you're moving up towards physical protection, perhaps body searches, knife arches, right up to the top end of the scale that government ministers, the Prime Minister himself, would have a full protection. But it has to be tailored to each individual MP and to what is sensible and possible in each set of circumstances.
Yeah, I suppose, somebody listening to that this morning who might want to speak to their MP about littering or problems with one of the shops in town or whatever, if they think that their background is going to be checked, where they live is going to be checked, whether they're on any sort of register is going to be checked, and then they're going to have to go through an airport-style scanner and then potentially body searched as well, they're not going to do it, are they?
No, and this is part of the difficulty of protecting the liberal democracy that we all want to live in. And that's why I'm saying it has to be a matter of negotiation. And ultimately, it can only be provided if the MPs themselves are prepared to accept it. You've raised a number of situations. I can imagine situations where somebody wants to complain about having been victimised by the police themselves. And having a uniformed police officer, or knowing that there is a police officer there, would be a very off-putting situation. And nobody would want that to be in place.
No. Online hate has, according to the Deputy Prime Minister, made politicians more at risk now than they were 10 years ago. I'm guessing that you would concur with that.
Oh, the echo chamber of social media can only do harm, as far as I'm concerned. The idea that somebody can be pushing hate speech toward any individual, not just MPs, but any individual, without even identifying themselves, is just frankly absurd. And it needs to be rectified. But equally, public discourse around politics needs to change. Abuse from anonymous members of the public is awful, but we've seen only 2 recently, abuse from other MPs. We have to learn to have political debate with respect. And that's a starting point. That's a cultural change that needs to happen. And that in itself, hopefully, will protect our democracy and our MPs.
Stephen Roberts, former Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police, based in Essex. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.